Hello everyone, and it is day 4 of the MSI main stage group stage. I have to say main stage because we did the play-in and it's a needlessly complicated thing. In any case, we are going to go ahead and go over RNG, who had the 2-0, Flash Wolves, who nosedived, and we're going to finish up by talking about the very entertaining Fnatic versus Team Liquid match. So, to start off, we're just gonna dive straight into RNG and discuss what went right for them today.
So, the first match, we had MLXG got absolutely dumpstered early. They tracked him super well. He was not able to do much. And then part of it was also because it's like they tracked him well early, but then he also did that really weird invade at like, I think it was like 2 minutes, and they had complete vision of him and he died, and it set him back about like, I think 2 to 3 levels and several jungle camps. I think the cool thing about this game is that not only were people joking around that MLXG is tilt proof, which I actually think seems kind of true because he always just does whatever, but it was also we saw the Malzahar make an appearance, which I think helped. Mm-hmm. I also thought that the Ming Alistar combo plus the Malzahar and Kaisa allowed RNG to collapse on Kingzone, and I also think that Kingzone didn't transfer a lot of their advantages well. Mm-hmm. When we saw, like, obviously Peanut had, like we said, complete control, right, over MLXG's jungle for a significant amount of time. And they didn't really transfer that advantage to either top. Like, I think they could have transferred it top, which is something we've seen this team do before, especially since we had Khan on a champion where you do kind of want to side lane him in Camille. So I was kind of surprised to see that they didn't transfer that advantage particularly well. I don't know. What did you think about that? Because I thought that was the thing that mainly stuck out to me in this game, and also that's kind of what allowed RNG to get back into it. I also think this was a really good game for Ming as well. So we can talk about that, because
yeah, Ming has been playing pretty well. I would say the only game where he didn't do well was the TL game. And that was just really weird laning issues where he got caught by a bunch of bindings. But overall, he's been playing extremely well. He looks very good on these engage champs. Like the engage bottom, I think they actually don't, like, MLXG doesn't land his Q or something like this, but Ming manages to get the follow-up with the Alistar engage, and it's fine. And so that's when they get their early kill spot for Kaisa. The interesting thing to me is that, like, these teams, it felt better for RNG in general in terms of like how they're showing up and what they're playing, generating set. Like, one of the things about Malzahar that people have kind of not talked about as much is Malzahar actually sidelanes really well. And one of the reasons why he fell out of favor, like, there were a bunch of different reasons, nerfs and everything else, but it's just that, like, he needs Lost Chapter to really push back in most lane matchups. Then he kind of takes over the lane with his oppressive wave clear abilities, but he basically needs Lost Chapter, and Lost Chapter's cost increase. So that's part of his issues. But RNG are really happy to play mid matchups that are not gonna get pushed. They saved the mid matchup for last counterpick. It's good against Galio, who's had his own wave clear nerfed, so they eventually get pressure back mid, and it doesn't take them that long, and they're able to use that to really effectively control, like, the bot river with it, which I thought was really good. So we're starting to see some of the nicer things about RNG and some of the things that they're better at coming through. At the same time, however, I feel like today was a little bit misleading in terms of how effective RNG are, because a lot of stuff was just like, Flash Wolves and King Zone opting into really awkward bot lane skirmishes or things of that nature that allowed UZI to be on a pick that snowballs out of control. Like, for example, just looking real quickly at the King Zone versus RNG game, like the most telling part for me, which I'm just gonna play this here. Sorry if it's a little janky. Hold up. We have RNG versus King Zone about like 23 minutes into the game. What just happened was you had a situation where like RNG are able to get the push mid, and BDD is responding by going topside. Of course, RNG are clearing out the vision, getting the river here because they managed to get push priority mid. King Zone soft reset the mid wave. But what they think now is that someone is going to have to answer that top wave. They immediately see Shahu top and they decide, okay, now is a good time to force on the bot side. However, they know that most of RNG is bottom, so they're probably opting into a 4v4 because obviously like their blue buff is just spawning everything else, and they go for this, and they know that BDD is in their base. So this is a 4v4, guys. This is going to be like a skirmish in this scenario. Most of the gold is going to be on UZI. All that's in place. Key is they do not expect Malzahar to switch for TP, like to change to back, switch summoner spells, and go for the TP. So it's just like things like this where you're opting into situations where you know you don't have the advantage.
Yeah, I think they also, I think because they felt like BDD, like they picked this for BDD basically so that he could be at a team fight fairly quickly. But I also think that throughout this game, the thing that stood out to me was that they also underestimated RNG's ability to stack CC. Because you see several times they're able to, it happens in this, it happens in another skirmish, I believe, as well, where they're able to kind of separate things out, and it's also because BDD comes in late. Yeah. Or,
oh, you mean in the King Zone game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Also in that game, too. But it's basically, when we're looking at a lot of these skirmishes, and if you're wondering, like, why UZI suddenly gets, like, super out of control, not only is that pick super snowbally, but I do think one thing that RNG did a pretty good job with these team comps is being able to separate out individual members of the opposing team, which is perfect for Kaisa. There is also the other fight in the Flash Wolves game that's really good with the Talia wall when they think they like Flash Wolves basically think that they catch out Karsa, and then they actually didn't. And they're able to turn. Also, part of that is because I believe Hanabi misses his initial taunt. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, we can just
this is getting
play that
rambly,
real quick.
But yeah.
It's simple since I have it up as well. We'll just talk about that one real quick. So let's just go ahead and play this. Effectively, what happens here is that RNG are in a position where they have control in almost every single lane. Even let me so theoretically Hanabi could ult here. Like, they know that neither of them have TP, so Hanabi could ult here, but he'll probably lose waves for it because of how much priority Let Me has in the lane. And they're going off of that assumption basically to say, okay, we can make this a 5v4. And they end up overcommitting for Karsa, and the fight separates them, and so it very quickly turns in RNG's favor because of the Talia ult. And it's just like, you don't want to opt into this fight anyway because you're going to lose so much top. And if you're opting into it with your mid as well, you'll lose so much mid even if Xiaohu doesn't join. So let's just assume that like RNG are not going to do this fight, or RNG are not going to collapse and then turn the situation for you. Then you still have a setup where, you know, Xiaohu's pushing mid, Lemmy's pushing top, and you're losing like effectively 1 or 2 waves in each of those scenarios, and your top lane and your mid lane is going to be really far behind. So it's just weird because it's like Flash Wolves draft in that scenario put themselves in a really bad position, and didn't necessarily have priority on scaling either, even though I think that like they should get side lane control because they have Malz and they have Shen. but they're in a bad position early on because they can't force anything, and they're afraid of the Kaisa scaling. So, and all their lanes kind of suck basically until Shen can get Hydra. So it's just a sad day.
And we also saw, like, I've been super, like, if you watched the last episode, we were very critical of RNG's early game, and it was more aimed at their lane assignments, but I actually did want to give RNG credit for their setup in the Flash Wolves game, because I thought they recognized where they could either invade for vision, and then also they recognized that the lanes would allow Karsa to basically invade on Graves, and he was able to contest every camp for a really long time. Like, Muujin was not able to do much in this game at all, and it really affected the opening of the game, and how the Flash Wolves are really unable to come back, because, to your point, their draft is one where they are probably going to get pushed in, but then also they have their jungler not being able to do much of anything because Karsa is constantly contesting him for every single camp. And that's something that I was really happy to see, because if you remember in the previous episode, I was like, oh man, they're going to put Karsa in with a really weird team comp and it's going to be bad because RNG have done this in the past. But this was a great setup for Karsa. They had a really good level 1 read, and it really allowed him to take over the jungle in that game, which was very significant. So this is the best, in my opinion, this is the best early game that RNG has had at this entire tournament. And I was happy that they were able to put Karsa in and play around him really well instead of testing out one of their more experimental team compositions.
Yeah, and we've seen them play this kind of approach with MLXG. I actually think that they're better at executing this kind of thing with MLXG, but this composition in this draft was just really strong in general for setting all those things up. Let Me was playing really well in terms of keeping top pressure even after Shen got Tiamat, and then it just was a good combination of the Karma and the Kaisa. I think a lot of people are hesitant to put Kaisa with these like mage supports that don't have engage, because obviously you can't stack her passive and her lane presence just feels less oppressive in that sense. But if Ming is able to control the lane, then it doesn't necessarily matter that much. If you have engage and CC on the rest of your composition, it doesn't matter that much. So I think it went pretty well overall. It's a little bit of an odd draft in certain circumstances, because obviously you don't, in that case, have a lot of hard engage, but you have to rely basically on Talia to set up terrain and Kaisa to go in on effectively rupture. I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
So it's kind of a bit weird from that perspective, but you can see how self-sufficient or how strong UCI can be with like shields and just terrain and the ability to, like, Talia's ults had to be so on point to get that to work off. So you have the ability to see how confident RNG with that kind of setup, with the pushing lane setup, and how devastating it can be. But on the flip side of the coin, as we talk a bit more about Flash Wolves, you see how much they struggle when they're not able to get down that early vision that we've praised them about so much for, when they aren't able to get the pushing lanes that they really want and that kind of setup, because they also struggled with that in the Fnatic game as well.
Yeah, I think this is kind of, so going into the tournament, this isn't really anything new for Flash Wolves. The thing that surprised me was how well they were able to transfer pressure into mid game and then not mess up in the mid game and give away their advantages, because they do that. But I do think the Fnatic game, when we did see that, one thing that kind of, I guess, heartened me about the Flash Wolves a little bit is that when Fnatic did give up advantages to Flash Wolves, like at about, I think it was like 17, 18 minutes, Flash Wolves basically take down their first turret, and then because of the way that Fnatic backs and resets, they end up taking all 3 tier 1 turrets within the next minute. So that kind of, not that I still think Flash Wolves do struggle, obviously, when they don't get the bot side vision down, when they aren't able to get early advantages. We've seen them improve at transferring those advantages, but I still think they have problems playing from a deficit. However, that tiny section of the Fnatic game where they were still able to take those turrets down, keep themselves in the game, and obviously Fnatic did leave that opening up for them to do so, right? But it was nice to see them recognize that and take advantage of it, where in the past I feel like they may have played a bit more passive and still given up those advantages to their opponent. So that was also good to see, despite the fact that, again, Flash Wolves, they do struggle a lot more when they don't have a good vision net and when they are at a disadvantage in the early game.
Yeah, and they struggle to identify also in the RNG game when Ken should be able to have push, and then when Malzahar should be able to have push, and how to set up jungle with those lanes. Like into mid to late game, Brundle, Mugen struggled to know if he should group or he should be inside, and obviously there's a very short laning phase outside. There was a very short mid game in that game, because Flash Wolves ended up in their own base very quickly, but you still saw a bit of that indecision through. As well as in the Fnatic game, where, if I recall correctly, since I was mostly playing 2 topside, which was weird to me, because I felt like he should be closer to where Ezreal and Morgana are. But I think that using Xin Zhao with Zoe was very smart. Because what you want is you want to restrict the ability of Fnatic's composition to be able to get... like, Fnatic actually, I thought, had a good composition in that set, because they had the Camille, who was going to have strong side pressure. Like, Sivir and Talia's wave clear is very repressive. And so you want to restrict Talia's ability to sideline. So you're going to want to be in a position where Zoe is going to be like your primary wave clear. I actually didn't like Flash Wolves' composition because they had so little just like mid clear in that respect. So they had to rely on the ability to group with Zoe and Ezreal and then just poke them down enough so that, and Morg, and just poke them down enough so that Xin Zhao could go in. But if Fnatic play their composition out correctly, they'll coordinate the waves so that they're pushing all at the same time, and then that will really split out Flash Wolves' poke, and then you have things like the Sivir spell shield that's acting so to nullify any poke like that, and then Flash Wolves can just creep into the base very easily. However, Fnatic had like really poor setups from that perspective. They grouped way too much, and they lost. Fnatic still were able to get like vision control around Baron and force Fnatic into a position where they Baron stole. So like, just short soapbox, Baron steals are fun to watch and they're cool and they're hype, but if your team is constantly in positions where your jungler gets a reputation for stealing Barons, they're probably doing something wrong with their vision control.
What are you talking about? Broxa won them that game now. That's actually kind of why I wanted to start with the early game and start with, you know, that like small turret lead where basically Flash Wolves kind of turn around and are able to set up their vision, because I think that there's a lot more going on. Obviously, the Baron steal is cool, but there's a lot more going on in this game from both teams that they did well and they did poorly. So,
yeah, I mean, I think if Fnatic played out their composition correctly, they wouldn't lose control of Baron, and they
wouldn't have to rely on the steal.
A Baron steal scenario. They wouldn't lose vision around Baron off of bad backs, etc., etc. So it was a little weird. Obviously, the poke is really annoying in mid at a certain point, but like you said, the goal should be to, like I said, the goal should be to split up that interference or that threat, and just push a ton of minions at it, you know, because then they can't poke you down if you're constantly behind minions.
They have to poke the minions. Yep.
But let's see. It's a good summary of how do we feel about Flash Wolves going into tomorrow. Do we think that they're going to keep the first place spot, or are they going to end up losing to Kingzone and they play
TL.
Evos.
Oh no,
TL, they play Evos,
they
right? Or
play
do they play
TL
TL?
and King
Okay,
Zone.
they do
Yeah.
play TL and King Zone. Okay. So do we think they lose to TL and King Zone?
Um, King Zone is close. I still do want to give it to King Zone, despite
Okay.
the fact that I don't think we saw the best from them today either. Like, again, I don't think they did a good job transferring their early advantages or recognizing where they could transfer those early advantages. But I would still give it to King Zone, and then I would still give Flash Wolves the TL game. So that would put them at, what, 7-3?
I think that they should
And
still. I don't know why my phone is ringing. Sorry.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would put them at 7-3. So it would require King Zone winning both of their games, and then there would be a tiebreaker, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Which could happen, could not happen. I mean, I think Flash Wolves should be able to recover. The only worrying thing that we really saw today that could continue in the next day is if their opponents do get an early lead. Like, TL has kind of refocused on getting those early advantages through laning.
Mm-hmm.
Despite the fact that I think Flash Wolves' vision control is significantly better than Team Liquid's. So that could still be a problem for them if they do fall behind an early deficit, but I would still give that game to them. So I'll say Flash Wolves will stay like at the top, although it could be a tiebreaker, because I think they're going to end up at like 7-3.
Sure. I still think Flash Wolves look, even after today's games, I think overall they are looking like the best team at the tournament still. Even as I was saying that though, I still didn't really expect them to win the tournament. Like, I've been saying that they're performing like the best team at the tournament, but I don't necessarily expect them to win it because I do think that there are very obvious gaps in things. I think Kingzone at this point are drafting like a team that plays well into Flash Wolves with bot and mid priority set up very well so that they can't get river vision for free, that they can't get that kind of control, and then Flash Wolf will make like sort of random forcing mistakes. So yeah, I still think Flash Wolves are playing really well though.
Yeah.
Anyway, how do we feel about Fnatic versus Team Liquid?
This game was super entertaining.
That's one way to put it, yes.
I think it showed the I think it showed the best and worst of both teams, if that makes sense. Like, I think it showed what these teams are good at, and then also what these teams might struggle with at times. I think I really did like, I don't know, I mean, I know people have been harping on TL's drafting, but I did like this draft for Team Liquid specifically, because again, like, I like the reappearance of the Malzahar. I think that if TL wanted to create side pressure with Pobelter, they could. That didn't necessarily happen, but again, the thought process is there. So, and I do like the Malzahar Jhin combo. I like Smithy on the Olaf as well. So I liked both drafts for both of these teams. I don't think either of them necessarily executed it properly. I know a lot of people are probably going to criticize the Karma mid, but I wasn't super as down on it, I guess, as some other people. I thought it was fine. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of a showing of, like, from Team Liquid's case, there's that part where they get Baron and they could totally split into side lanes and they just siege mid instead, and then Fnatic like kills them before they can get inhib. That was kind of the illustration of Team Liquid for me, just in general. I know you have a lot to say about Fnatic's approach to side lane pressure in this game. I think in both cases, it was these teams coming in, they each have a game plan, and then the execution is off on both sides.
Fair. I think that the general narrative is that Fnatic's drafts are just really, Fnatic's draft was really disrespectful. That seemed to be the narrative that I kept hearing on Twitter and from a bunch of different people. But you look at Fnatic's draft and it's the classic case of, oh, okay, well, the enemy team has a Tom Kench comp that scales really well with their solo lane scaling really well, so they can do a 1-3-1. So we're responding by having like a collapse, hard engage, scaling team fighting comp on the right.
Mm-hmm.
That's been the theme of the tournament in general. Like Tom Kench kind of dictates the team comp that you're gonna play. And I did not, and it's like, okay, they don't have pressure in sides. It's like, well, that's really disrespectful. Have you seen how Team Liquid are playing this tournament? I mean, is it disrespectful? Is it really though? And in general, it just felt very, what I felt was weirder from Fnatic is they got super thrown off by the level 1, for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
They get insanely thrown off by the level 1. It's still better. They still have time for Reckless and Hylissang to go and leash for Broxah, so Broxah can path to top. But instead, what Broxah does is he decides he's gonna invade top when, for a variety of reasons, it would be idiotic of Smithy to do anything except start top and path to bot side. So, it just was that was very bizarre. And then because of that, Broxah is not able to get his level 3 trinket on top. And Smithy immediately sees him bot side and decides, oh, I can probably gank Bwipo. Yeah. Guess what happens?
He does.
There's probably not vision top side. I can probably gank Bwipo. So I thought that was far more
really good at
detrimental than anything else. Just both teams executed a lot of things very poorly. And I think I'm just going to summarize it by showing this particular clip. So let's just take a look at this, okay? It's pretty simple, straightforward. Because Bwipo is effectively getting pressure bot, Impact swaps when they reset and goes ahead and top where they have tempo on top side. This forces Karma to go up and answer. However, Bwipo could have gone back down and continued pressure on that bot lane. They have way more tempo there, so it's a bit awkward to see him doing that, and that's a big misstep from Fnatic there, because they're in a much better position if Bwipo is able to answer down there. But more importantly, they're in a much better position if Caps just goes up and hard pushes the waves top, so that the waves reset, and then he can rejoin the team. If he does that, because he's slow pushing here, this is the big issue. Like, the slow push here is just mind-boggling to me, because the slow push from Caps is giving up so much map control for TL. Just go ahead, he's still in this top position, while Team Liquid are able to get the tier 1 turret from Fnatic, transition, get Dragon, put Impact in a position, because Bwipo is, after wasting time going mid, Bwipo is suddenly going back down, so suddenly Team Liquid have tempo in all 3 lanes. And a lot of that is just down to Caps slow pushing, because if Caps had reset the wave, had bounced the wave back, he's able to group up, they're able to get control mid at minimum. If Bwipo doesn't go top, Bwipo's able to push back and reset at minimum, and instead he's slow pushing, and he stays there, and even after Team Liquid, because he's doing this, Team Liquid still have tempo, they use that to go ahead and collapse on Caps. They go ahead and collapse on Caps because he's slow pushing, and then Fnatic respond by going back bot. So let's take a look now a little bit at the problems that Impact is making and the problems that Team Liquid are making here. Just gonna back up a little bit here. All right, so we already covered how Team Liquid end up getting tempo and going top. So this is kind of a mistake, and this is where we're talking about what they screw up. So Impact is pushing bot here. Because of all of this, Fnatic go and respond bot. First of all, Team Liquid don't have to send that many people top, okay? So let's just take a look at this. They don't have to send that many people top, because once you do that, you're giving up pressure mid. There's no reason for Fnatic to stay mid, and they can go ahead and collapse bot. The other thing is that Impact doesn't need to be bot if everyone is going top, because they can totally make this play, because again, Caps is slow pushing top. Then they can just go ahead and go top. Impact fake pressures so that no one can collapse on him. and then they transition to mid the way that they do normally. But because of the way that Impact and the rest of Team Liquid are positioned, he ends up dying. They have to wait through his death timer, and even though Caps made the more egregious mistake by freezing topside, Fnatic are able to go 2 for 1 in turrets, which is just really, really bizarre overall, and I'm not really sure how that happened.
I thought it was entertaining. I didn't know people were commenting on the draft being disrespectful, because I actually thought it was fine. I just think both teams misplayed what they wanted to do. And also, like, again, with TL, you can't expect them, like, 1-3-1, they draft these comps a lot, and they don't always execute them well. So I didn't even know that people were making those comments. But I always learn what the community response is from you in these videos.
Despite the fact that I was upset that Impact was bot in that instance, he spends most of the game mid when he should be bot, because Bwipo gets like almost all the way to inhib turret when Cho'Gath should have priority in that lane, because even if they both do banners, obviously Cho'Gath has the option of feasting. He generally pushes better than Sion after a point anyway, so just because of his overall kit and his sustain and everything else. So it's just really weird to me that he's opting to constantly go mid when he could be pressuring to keep Bwipo inside. And I think the mentality might be that, okay, if I have to use my TP, Bwipo doesn't have to use his TP, he'll just ult. The issue is, Bwipo is never going to be able to ult, or he'll lose his turret, he'll lose his waves, he'll lose all of this stuff if you are just keeping pressure with your teleport threat. If you're just keeping pressure, Bwipo is not going to join. Fnatic lose a key engage tool, and the game is just much easier. So
yeah,
I just found the whole way this was set up a little bit bizarre. But all Caps has to do is push out like 1-2 waves, regroup, because he's not going to side lane as Karma. I'm not asking him to like push and threaten 1-3-1 or whatever, because that would be a silly use of his time. But if he just pushes the one wave, goes mid, helps defend mid, because between Karma and Sivir, they should not be able to push mid turret. Like if he's mid with the rest of the team, they should not be able to really siege that turret, because they should auto clear the wave, right? But that doesn't happen. So it's an interesting game. But all right, so
what do you think of TL and Fnatic going forward?
I think that they're interesting teams. Like I feel like TL have kind of found a little bit of footing in terms of stuff that they can play, stuff that they feel comfortable playing, like with the Shen. Obviously, Impact is more comfortable with the Shen because he feels like he can ult, and he can punish the enemy team for TPing, and he'll be there faster, and it's kind of like the Sion Cho'Gath scenario. I feel like that really dictates in his head whether he can sideline or not, when he should be fine to do it, regardless. But if he has pressure in the lane, if he wins 1v1, he should be able to consistently pressure the lane. That's it. And it doesn't really matter if he has TP or ult or whatever else. But that's how TL are playing right now. This seems to be their philosophy going forward. So I would say that there's stuff for them that works. There's stuff for that Fnatic that works. Fnatic, for me, it's mostly resets and kind of Baron setups, and then that was just that. The whole, like, the reason why I fixated so much on Cap slow pushing the wave is because they don't really do that. So it kind of threw me off. But yeah, just in general, I think these teams they're fine. I don't think TL make top 4, despite the fact that they managed to stay alive. I think it'll end up being Fnatic. But And yeah, okay, there was probably some mental stuff and mental hangups that TL did, but do I retract my rant about North America's macro? No, because it's still a problem, very clearly. Just because TL ended up performing a little bit better doesn't mean that that's still not a problem, as a huge, major problem with North America's international play. So
Well, I mean, we saw it even in this TL versus Fnatic game, right? Is like they have this really good split pushing comp and they don't use it correctly. No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't retract that. I like focusing more on what happens in game anyway. But yeah, I agree that TL are probably, just because of their start, they're probably going to find themselves on the outside looking in. We never know. We could have a repeat of Flash Wolf situation last year.
All right, so let's do a quick final day prediction. This main event. See what the order of games are. First, we have Fnatic versus Kingzone. Who do you think wins?
I'm gonna say Kingzone will take the rematch.
Yeah,
despite the fact that I really liked Fnatic's first game against Kingzone. I thought it was super smart. I think Kingzone will take the rematch though.
I'm not particularly high on Kingzone right now, but at the same time, because they're still making a ton of mistakes, and we'll probably talk about them more tomorrow. But the first game that Fnatic won, it was just the stars aligned. Fnatic got their God comp, they got their level 1. Like right now, we are already seeing teams like Team Liquid saying, "Oh, their bot lane is probably going to be a bot pixel brush level 1. We can actually even turn that against them instead of letting them get first blood." You know, so yeah, I'm gonna say Kingzone for this one. RNG Evos.
RNG.
Yeah. I keep wanting Evos and predicting Evos to win some games because I really think they can, you know, but they're just they're really far behind in a lot of fundamental stuff that we talked a little bit about yesterday.
Yeah. I mean, the thing that they're probably super kicking themselves for is that Fnatic game. Because if they just adjust their decision making like slightly, they win. So
Flash Wolves Team Liquid.
I am taking Flash Wolves here, like I said earlier, for the reasons I said earlier.
Actually, kind of tempted to predict Team Liquid.
I can see it.
Just because of the way that Team Liquid have shifted gears to play around strong bot lane more. But yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Flash Wolves just because I think that they understand mid pressure a little bit better, and I think Pobelter will give up too much priority, so I'm just Flash Wolves it is. Fnatic Evos.
I mean, so their first match was super close. I'm still going to take Fnatic here, but again, like if Evos just adjust their decision making, they win. And I think up to a point, they have a really good understanding of how to split 4-1 and what to do with their split pusher. Again, up until a point. So I'm still taking Fnatic, but again, I think this would be the game that Evos will take if they do win a second game.
Okay. So yeah, I'm gonna say Fnatic as well. Flash Wolves Kingzone.
So this is the game I think Flash Wolves will also lose because I think they're gonna end at 7-3. Okay. And I think Kingzone are gonna end at 7-3 most likely. But we'll see. Again, like we'll talk more about Kingzone tomorrow because I do think they are making a lot of mistakes. But I think they should be able to take this.
On the one hand, I think Kingzone are drafting more to punish the stuff that Flash Wolves like to play out now. But on the other, it just feels like Flash Wolves is a better team a little bit at the moment. And that'll probably change by bracket stage, and it might even change tomorrow, but it's just okay. I think I'll go Kingzone on this. Peer pressure. RNG Team Liquid.
Ooh. I'll go RNG. I wouldn't be surprised if TL takes this, but I also, because I think RNG had a good day, right? And I think we saw them be able to recognize, especially in terms of when they're bringing Xiaohu in to team fights. I love the Talia. I think they should aim to play that champion a lot more often. So I do think we saw a better day from RNG. I'm still taking RNG, despite the fact that I wouldn't be super shocked to see TL take it either. Like, I don't think RNG's issues have been solved. Yeah. And I still think they have major problems, right? And that they haven't addressed. But I also think that Team Liquid, kind of similar to looking at the Flashels Team Liquid game, I think TL's problems typically tend to start in the mid game when they fail to recognize where they can apply pressure when they have the advantage.
True.
And also how to set up vision around how to further that advantage. And I think RNG are actually quite good at that once they are able to set up their mid game. We've seen them kind of take control of games from that midpoint forward. So RNG.
RNG kind of picked mid today. They have red side versus Team Liquid. They're going to counterpick mid. RNG. Okay. The end. Yay! Thank you guys for watching. Though I will say RNG are not that different from Fnatic and TL in that we are seeing specific scenarios under which they're seeing. And it's easy to kind of deny those. Like, it's easy to deny Roxa something like Garner. It's easy to deny UZI something like Kaisa, and then put them a little bit more out of their comfort zone. Still, I do think it will hinge more on getting counterpick mid and not having Xiaohu struggle as much and making sure that 2v2 mid jungle is really working. So, see you guys tomorrow, and have a good night.